Well, a very warm welcome to you guys. Hi, it's Cassim, and welcome to another episode of Student Problems. I just firstly want to start off by thanking you very much for joining us this week. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me as I share with you some of my ideas, some of my strategies, some of my philosophies, and I hope that they can help you to become a higher, fuller expression of who you're capable of becoming. So there are 6 different topics that I want to talk about this week, or problems that people have been experiencing, that I thought that I would give you my thoughts, that I would give you my perspective on. And before we get into them, as I've always said, whenever you're listening to me share some of my advice on this, don't look at the details, look at the context. Meaning, don't listen if clearly somebody's talking about the fact that they're having debt problems, but their debt problems are that they are £50,000 in debt. The fact that you're £10,000 in debt doesn't really make a difference. The advice, the principles, the keys, the rules are what you want to look out for. So, also, if you guys like some of the things that I'm going to share with you and you find them useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Cassimotive on YouTube to get more of this stuff, because that's where I put most of the content that I produce for you guys. So the 6 different topics that I want to talk about are: number 1, somebody who said that I've fallen in love and I've fallen for a slut, which is a bit of a horrible thing to say, but we'll get into it. The second person has said that I've fallen out with my best friend. The third one is a law. Should I go after law or should I go after business after graduation? The fourth is, what are the top degrees for becoming a millionaire? The fifth one is, how would you feel about your parents splitting up? And the 6th one is, why are parents so against sex? So a right different kind of array of different questions that we've got this week. And I won't hold back any longer. Let's just get straight into it, and let's go into the first one. So the first one is entitled, I've Fallen for a Slut. And it goes something like this. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but there's this girl who I've been friends with for a few months now. And she's a bit of a slut, but if I'm honest, it has been often said about her because she slept with so many people. But besides being a slut, she's a really funny, adventurous kind person who really is a lot of fun to be around. She's also really good looking. Over the past couple of weeks, this friend and I have started getting with each other on nights out quite a fair bit. I guess I've always found her very attractive, but because I've had a girlfriend, I've never taken action. However, me and my girlfriend have now split up. The bad thing is, this girl now has a boyfriend, but he cheats on her a lot and treats her really badly. I'm aware this is kind of wrong, but I've still been doing things with this girl even though she's with her boyfriend. I justify it in my head that he deserves it for the way he treats her, but I know really it's not right. Thing is, I'm not the only guy she does things with. There are loads of us in my position. The thing is, I'm starting to develop really strong feelings for her, which is obviously bad for so many reasons. The fact that she's a slut doesn't even seem to put me off. I'm just really into her, but wish I wasn't, because she's obviously nothing but trouble. I guess what I'm interested in is, A, has something similar ever happened to anyone else? And B, if it has, how did the story develop? And the other is, does anyone have any advice on how I can move on from this and no longer feel the way that I do? Okay, well, thank you very much for the question, is the first thing that I would say. And I actually want to say I'm really sorry about your girlfriend. I mean, I know you briefly obviously mentioned the fact that you split up with your girlfriend, and I want to apologize. You know, I think like anyone going through a breakup, we all deal with breakups differently. We all deal with the healing process differently. And I want to apologize to you, because clearly you must be someone who is hurting. If you say that you were in a relationship before, and you obviously have broken up from that relationship, you must still be going through a healing process. Now, I know some people, their healing process can be a week, some people it can be a day, and for some people it can be a year. But I just want to firstly start off by saying I'm really sorry. Obviously, I don't know what happened with your other girlfriend, but I'm really sorry about that. The second thing that I would share with you is I would stop using the word slut. And the reason why I tell you this is because through your entire message, you've kept using all these labels to describe this friend of yours. And the thing is, when you start living your life based, and this, what I'm talking about is a much bigger concept, but when you start living your life based on labels and you start calling people sluts and whatever, at some point, inevitably, people are going to start calling you the same thing. People are going to start defining you by the labels that they see you as. That's the problem. Right? So if you start being a dickhead, everybody's going to call you a dickhead. If you start getting in debt, everybody's going to see you from the prism of being in debt. Which kind of leads me to the other thing that I wanted to share with you, which is that this whole scenario, you're making it out to be about the girl, but this whole scenario isn't about the girl. This whole scenario is really actually about you. This entire scenario is really about your morality, because the issue is, this girl clearly knows or isn't aware of the fact that, as you quote her, she's a slut. But that's not your problem for you to tell her how she should and should be living her life. That's her prerogative, right? If she wants to be a slut, that's completely up to her. That's not your job to tell her that she shouldn't live her life like that. What you need to worry about and you need to focus on is, do you want to be associated with somebody who is engaged in those kinds of activities? Because I would share with you that if you are clearly somebody who is having this, what in psychology they call a cognitive dissonance, meaning there's this tug of war, you're basically going against your morality. You know that it's wrong, but you're still doing it. What will eventually happen is going to start to erode your self-confidence, and this is going to attach to something way bigger to do with your mental health, to do with your convictions, to do with your standards about expectation. It's actually going to change the way you see women, right? It's going to change the way you see yourself. It's going to change the way you see other people, and it's a lot more complicated than that, but I don't really want to get into the complexities of it. But I would share with you that this whole scenario really isn't about the girl. This whole scenario is really about you. You know, I very strongly believe that everything that happens in our lives is there to teach us something about us. Okay? Everything. And this scenario that is happening to you right now is teaching you something about you. I think so many times in life, many of us, we go through life and we say, I am like this. But actually, one of the things that really separates going from childhood to adulthood, right? Because there is a lot of males who say that they're mature, who say that they're men, but in reality they're not. What defines going from teenagehood or going from childhood to adulthood, in part, is understanding that you have to start living integrously. Meaning that the word integrity means to be one. It means to be whole. It means that both what you say and what you do is integrated. It's the same. And I would share with you that if you truly want to develop to become the highest possible version of what it means to be a male, then I would share with you that you need to start living integrously with what you say and what you do. Because you talk about the fact that being, clearly the way you've written this is that being a slut is a bad thing. Yet you, number one, are associating with somebody who's like that, which means that you clearly must think it's okay. And number two, you're actually engaging in the activity. So you're actually perpetuating it. You are fueling the very thing that you say you don't like, that you're up against. In fact, it would come across as though you believe that somebody who is a slut in some way is somebody who is a bad person, right? And as I say, that everything that happens to us is really a reflection of us. So I would say to you that you, as you've written this, there is this constant contradiction. You say that she's a slut, but you say that she's a good person and she's actually fun to be around. What that really is a reflection of you. You are going through this internal battle within yourself. And I would share with you that the problem isn't to focus on her. The problem is you need to focus on you. You need to look at yourself and ask yourself, what is it about this situation that is teaching me about me? Is it that I'm a judgmental person? Is it that I've realized that I'm somebody who sees the world from the prism of what people do, not what their essence is? Right? You want to begin to look at this. Now, let me actually go back and actually answer the questions that you've actually asked, which is, has anybody else ever been in a similar situation? Of course, loads of people have been in a similar situation, right? But it doesn't really matter about other people because this is your life and you can't control what other people do. All you can control is what you do. So number one is you need to figure out, is this a situation that you want to engage in, that you want to be involved in? The other question that you ask is, does anybody else have any advice about how to move on from this? I would go and say that that's the wrong question. The question is, do you even want to move on from this, right? Because you say that it's a bad thing, but yet you're still engaging in it. So the question isn't that, is it a bad thing or isn't it a bad thing, and how do you move on from it? The question is, do you want to move on from it? Do you still want to engage in it? Because look, and this is where I say you've really got to look at the prism in which you're seeing the world from. It is okay for you to engage in this activity, but not be a bad person, right? Because as I said to you before, there are some people who, in your words, are sluts, and they're okay with that. That isn't a problem. But in your definition and the way that you've put this is that being a slut is a bad thing. So you need to figure out for yourself, is this something that you want to move from? Is this a bad thing for you to engage in? And when you start seeing things from that perspective, I think it should be able to give you a different perspective and a different light on this whole concept. I just ask you to sit on it, right? And I think really look at what I say, which is that every situation in our lives is there to teach us something about us. And look at, what is this situation teaching you about you? And it's something that you're actually going to have to think about, right? You're going to have to think about, well, what am I learning from this? Well, what is she teaching me? A lot of the times when we experience problem in our lives, the tendency that most of us have is to blame everybody and everything on the outside, right? Many of us, for example, in your situation, you're blaming her. Everything would come about as if it's her fault, and she in some way is luring you into this trap, and she in some way is engaging you in this kind of a taboo, horrible act that you don't want to be engaged in. But the reality is, you are choosing to engage in it. She's not forcing you, right? You are engaging in it. Like, of course, it may be difficult and it may be hard and she's really attractive, but ultimately, you are making the decision to engage in it or not, or whether not to engage in it. And that's really what you need to look at. That's the bit that you need to examine. Let me finish off by saying to you that as I began off earlier on, I said to you that you want to be very careful by judging people and labeling people based on the things that they do. Because at some point, all of us make errors in judgment. All of us, we fuck up. All of us, we go in the wrong direction. And I warn you that if you perpetuate that and you go down that path of judging people based on what they do, not who they are at their essence, when your time comes, everybody is going to judge you. And in fact, I would flip this entire situation around and say, could it be that you are actually using her? You know that she's vulnerable. Because let's think about this. If somebody is in a situation where they're, especially a girl, right? We know that it is taboo and it's not perceived as something which is a virtue for a woman to be sexually active with many different partners, right? Most countries and traditions around and cultures around the world would agree that this is a bad thing, right? Now, So it means that if a girl is engaging in that activity, number one, it means that she's very promiscuous. She doesn't care what people think. She is going through a lot of pain, and the way that she's going through a lot of pain is she's basically allowing people to abuse her sexually, whatever it may be, right? But the point being is, you know this, and yet you're exploiting her. You see, it's the same situation. But now when I judge, I'm now judging you based on what you're doing, not actually what your intention is. You know, I read a book many years ago by a guy called John Maxwell, and John Maxwell said that most of us, we judge people by what they do, and we judge ourselves by the reasons why we do it. I ask you to consider this question. Are you judging her based on what she's doing, or are you judging her based on the reasons why she's doing what she's doing? Because I've learned in my life that context matters. The reason why somebody is doing something matters. And if you don't know why she's doing it, and you just judge her based on the action, you were actually the villain. You were actually the bad guy, right? Think about this and I was actually writing this in my book recently, when somebody is convicted of like a murder and they're going through the trial, one of the things that everybody wants to know is a context. Why did they commit the murder? What circumstances led up to the person? Were they drunk? Were they in a rage? Did they have an argument? What was it that led up to the person committing the murder? Because the context matters. My question to you is, do you know the context in this situation? Just something for you to think about. All right, so, and I hope I've answered that question to the best of my ability there, but thank you very much for the question. So the second one that we want to get into today goes something like this. It's entitled Falling Out with My Best Friend. It says, "Hi, I have a problem. I have fallen out with my best friend 6 months ago, and we've just basically made up," is what he's saying. "Back then, she was calling me all sorts and saying things like about my family, but I wasn't much better except for the family bit. I would never dare say anything about anyone's family. But the question is, am I right to be getting back mates with her? We are both in year 9 and we will be going into year 10. The very simple answer is, well, firstly, let's start off by saying thank you very much for the question. The very simple answer that I would give you is yes. Okay? If I was in the situation that you're in, I would become friends with her again. And let me tell you why. As I've got older, I've come to realize that having good people that you trust, having good loyal friends is a rarity, okay? If you speak to people who are much older, people who are 30, 40 years of age, they'll tell you that having people who are there for you, people who love you, people who care for you is really, really difficult, right? There are most of us know loads of people, but those people actually backing us is very, very difficult. But the other thing that I would share with you is, you know, if you really wanted to answer this question, here is how I determine whether I should be friends with people or I should engage in a relationship with somebody, particularly a friendship relationship. Here's how I look at it. Does this person want the best for me, for the best part of me? That's the question that I ask. Does this person want the best for the best part of me? In other words, if I go and tell this person I've got a new job, I've started a new business, I'm pursuing a new venture, I'm about to get married, will this person be the first person to say, let's get the champagne, let's go out, let's party, let's go for a meal? Or will they start telling me about how they've had a similar thing, or how it's unfair that you've got it and they haven't? Or will they try to diminish it, what I'm pursuing, or they try to compare it, or they try to tear it down? That's how you determine whether you should be friends with somebody or not. And so when you ask me this question, you want to be asking yourself the question, based on everything that has happened, does this person want the best for the best part of you? Because the reality of life is, look, when you have mates, of course you're going to fall out with them, okay? nobody can be friends with somebody, particularly somebody who cares for you. Do you know, let me give you, and not actually have an argument, let me give you another secret to determining whether you want to be friends with people. One of the other secrets that I have found, for me, that has worked, is that I've looked at this person, if they were my mate, would they risk upsetting me and telling me the truth at the cost of our relationship? Meaning, if the person who I'm friends with it knows that something is going to benefit me, or I'm making a really bad decision, would they tell me even though they know that it could cost us our friendship? Because if that person is willing to sacrifice our friendship so that they can tell me something which is going to hurt me, or something which is going to be upsetting for me, if they would do that, then I know that this person genuinely is for me. So let me give you an example. If my friend, say for instance, if I was going out with somebody and my friend did not, I don't know, my friend knew that I love this person, and my friend knew that this person was bad for me, and this person was a thief, or I was changing because of this person, would my friend be prepared to tell me that the relationship that I'm engaged in is bad, knowing that by them saying that we're going to fall out? If they're prepared to do that, then I know they're my friend. That is how I would answer your question. And I don't know whether that's kind of sent you in the right direction, or is kind of answered your question, but that's kind of how I would look at it. I would look at it from that prism of, does this person, number one, want the best for the best part of me? And will this person be willing to tell me something that could cost our friendship, but they love me so much and they care for me so much that they're prepared to tell me the truth, even though it's going to be at the cost of our friendship? If that is how I would essentially determine it, and I would look at it. So I hope that kind of helps you out. But thank you very much for the question. So that then takes us on to the third question, which is called law after graduation or business. And it goes something like this. It says, hi, I'm a third year currently, and I don't know whether I should do law, preferably a solicitor, or go into business. I have sufficient work experience in both fields, but I'm not entirely sure which one would be better in the long run. I'd be fine doing either. Now, the question is in regard to salary and vacancies. Which one of these two routes would be better income-wise and financial stability-wise? I'm a politics and economics student. Okay, so number one, thank you very much for the question. I really appreciate it. So let me answer this question so this question is actually, you're actually asking the wrong question, but let me ask you, firstly, give you the answer that you've directly asked for. So you've asked, you've asked which one of these two routes would be better income-wise. So income-wise, I would answer your question by saying to you that income-wise, probably getting into business is going to make you more money. Okay? That is probably, as a general rule, I would probably say if you go into business, you're going to make more money. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at the three ways in which people make money, there are three ways. So if you look at most millionaires, there are three strategies that most millionaires have in common. Number one, most of them own businesses. Number two, they invest money. And number three, they own assets, and usually properties. Okay, some have stocks and shares and bonds and gold and whatever, but those three are all common with people who are really wealthy. Almost every millionaire that you can think of or you meet and interview will probably either have a business, they will have multiple properties, and they will in some way have investments, and they will in some way have some investments. So that's the first question. The second question that you asked is stability-wise, which one is better financially? I would probably almost 100% say that in terms of stability and security, then becoming a lawyer or a solicitor 100% is always going to be better, because 9 out of every 10 businesses fail within the first 5 years. So obviously, becoming a solicitor, if you work for somebody, you can still get a really high salary and a really high income, and you've got stability, right? We're always going to need solicitors. If clearly God knows your firm shuts down, you can just move on to another one. If there is not a lot of work in one area, you can move from one area and go into another area of becoming a solicitor. So that's what I would share with you. Now, let me give you, so that's answering your question directly. But now let me give you the answer that I would give myself if I was in your situation based on my experience and my knowledge now. I think you're actually asking the wrong question. The question shouldn't be which one of these in the long run is going to be better for salary. And the reason why I tell you this is because essentially the amount of money that you make is going to be based on essentially one thing. The marketplace pays people based on the amount of value that they produce. And that can be either through a service or a product, right? So in other words, when people exchange money, when people give you money, or when your company gives you money, in some way they're going to pay you based on the service or the product that you're exchanging your services for. Okay, yourself for. And so what I would share with you is that the question that you should be asking is, what would make you which route would you prefer to become more valuable in? Because whatever route you become more valuable in is going to be the one that is going to pay them the highest amount of money, right? There are some people who are managers in Tesco's, but they don't get paid the same amount of money as somebody who is a manager in an accountancy firm. Why? Because the responsibility is different, right? The value that they're providing to the company in terms of their leadership, in terms of their knowledge, is completely different, right? And so what I would share with you is it isn't the amount of money that you get paid isn't about your position. It's about the value that you produce. So you want to actually, the question that you want to be asking, if you've decided that these 100% are the routes that you want to go down, the question that you want to be asking is, which one of these routes do you want to become the most valuable in? Because the more valuable you become, the more knowledgeable you become, the more skillful you become, the more experienced you become in either one of these, the more money you will be paid. Something for you to think about. The second question that you ask is in terms of stability. Stability is one of those things that is subjective, because how do you define stability, right? Some people would say, unless I have a regular paycheck coming in every single month, then I haven't got stability. Some people would say, I don't have to have a really high salary or really high income stability coming in every month, but I would rather at the end of the year I get a massive bonus, right? But I have really shit money all throughout the year. So you've got to decide for yourself, actually, and the question you should be asking is, what does stable mean to you, right? And even a higher question than that is, what are you prepared to do to get stability? Because you could, for example, end up going down a route where you end up becoming a solicitor. But if you become a solicitor, you may have stability, but you may be unhappy because everything is controlled. You may have stability, but you won't be able to earn the amount of money that you want to earn. Because when you work in a solicitor's firm, some of the solicitor's firm can only pay you so much, right? You may be you've heard of people, right, who are working for companies, but they're way overqualified for the position, right? And the company has a limit on how much they can pay for them. But if you, for example, decide to go into business, we know that obviously there is no limit on how much money you can earn, right? As long as you keep scaling up and you keep providing a service or a product into the marketplace, people will keep buying it if there's a need for it. And so, but then you need to decide that, would you be prepared to give up sometimes 10, 15, 20 years of your life of not having stability to then having stability, right? Because you have your own business, you can control everything, you can control your income, right? You determine how much you work, you determine what people come into you employ. Do you understand? It really is a question of you. This question isn't really about other people. This question is really about you, right? And actually, most of the questions that you're asking aren't questions that anybody can really answer, because they're all really as a result of you. So I think it's very easy in this particular situation to try and fob off and try to use the answer that I'm going to give you, which is the first answer that I gave you at the beginning, and use that as your reference. And if it doesn't work out, you are then going to say, well, I said to you to go down this route. This is why you have to decide. And actually, this question isn't about what I think is the best route, because the issue is that there are advantages and disadvantages and to both of these questions that you've asked me. So what I would share with you is you need to look at it at yourself, actually, right? You need to look at it from yourself and ask yourself, are you somebody who wants stability, and how do you define stability? Are you somebody who wants to have a high salary, and what even is a high salary? How do you define a high salary? Is a high salary £100,000, or is a high salary £1,000,000, right? You've got to determine that for yourself. We know that there are lawyers who get paid millions of pounds, but we know that there are business people who get paid millions of pounds too, right? It's different routes, it's different predicaments, it's different advantages and disadvantages. So what I would share with you is you've got to decide for yourself which one of those goes for you. That's really the real questions. You're asking the questions at the wrong places. The question actually, this is an exploration of you. That's where this is going to determine. Because clearly, you pretty much probably know that you are somebody who's going to become successful anyway, right? You've already gone to university, you're already in your third year, so you pretty much know you're going to become successful. The question now that you need to determine is, what is success to you? How do you define that, right? I once heard Oprah say that so much of getting what we want in life is about living in the space of what we don't have. So that means most of getting what you're going to get anyway, of becoming successful, of achieving stability, right, of achieving a high income, is going to be determined, much of that journey is going to be getting there, right? So you are going to have to decide for yourself, what does it mean to you? Which journey would you be pleased with going down? These are all questions that you have to ask yourself. So I would spend most of our time not looking at this question. You're looking this question isn't a question of like facts of A or B. This isn't like a question of I'm going to university. There are two different universities which offer exactly the same course, and the tutors are both exactly the same. And basically, this is not a scenario of choosing A or B. This is a morality question, and when morality is engaged, you can't measure it. It has to be something which is intrinsic. It has to be personal, right? I can't tell you what success is, because what I think success is different to you. I can't really tell you what a high income is, because a high income is something which is subjective, right? For example, for me, I hear people say to me that them earning 50 grand is a lot of money. I do not think that £50,000 is a lot of money. It's nothing. What can you do? You can't do anything with 50 grand, right? To me, I hear people say that working for a company which is like a big corporation, has got more stability. But I disagree, because I actually think if you work for yourself and you have control over your company and who you employ and how hard you work and the direction of your company, you have a lot more security than working for a company where people are making big decisions are outside of your control. Do you see what I'm saying? These are not kind of like ABC factual answers. These are intrinsic answers. They're personal. So you have to decide it for yourself, is what I would share with you. But thank you very much for the question, and I hope that it's answered. I've answered it. So that takes us on to the next question, which is called, what are the top degrees for becoming a millionaire? And it goes like this. I was just wondering, what the best degrees are for eventually becoming a millionaire? I would assume medicine, if you become a specialist, law and economics to become an investment banker. Very, very good question. Thank you very much for the question. Again, like the previous question which I answered, I would share with you that you're actually looking at this question all the wrong way. You're actually asking the wrong question. To become a millionaire is a result, right? Do you understand what I mean? So, for example, becoming a millionaire is the equivalent to somebody saying, I want apples. Apples are the result of a process that has taken place of going and buying seeds, or buying an apple or mango tree, planting it, watering it. There is a process that has to take place, and then eventually you get the mango trees. So the question that you're asking is actually the wrong question. The question that you should be asking is, what are you going to do that is going to produce £1 million? Now, I would share with you that there are 3 common roots or 3 common denominators that millionaires all have in common. The first is that all millionaires, not all of them, but the majority of them have businesses. Okay? Now, obviously, there are some people who are very high in their job, like CEOs of Disney and Coca-Cola and people like that. Okay? But those people are one in, well, how many Coca-Colas are there? How many Fortune 500 companies are there? Not many, right? And the amount of, and usually those people have worked for that company for like 30, 40 years. It's so competitive. And even if you work for the company for 30, 40 years and somebody else comes along who is better, it doesn't guarantee you an opportunity, right? The company can be failing and a company come in and acquire it and they want a different CEO. And just because you work for the company for 30 years, it doesn't mean that they're going to automatically give you the role. Right? So the first common denominator that links most millionaires is that they have their own businesses. The second of which is that they all own investments, right? If you don't own your, because remember, if you own a business and your business goes public or whatever, you can make £1 million overnight. You can become a millionaire literally overnight. Secondly, is if you have investments, your investments over a long period of time will make you a millionaire. And the third of which is properties or assets. People who become millionaires or 1 millionaires, the majority of them have assets. They have gold, they have houses, they have yachts, they have like investments, they have all kinds of different assets, right? And so you want to actually, and all of this is about producing value. But at the center of all of this, there is the single number one thing is, which is that you have to figure out how you're going to accumulate income in the first place. Okay, that's really your main the main question that you want to ask. Now, there are 2 ways to create income. Number 1 is that you can produce a product or a service, or number 2 is that you can exchange your time. Okay, now you can exchange your time obviously by becoming valuable or by working for a company, and the other is you produce a product or a service, like you become somebody who is like a business person, you sell phones or whatever it may be, right? And that's really the question that you want to be asking yourself, because all of these questions that I'm suggesting to you are all the process of what it takes. You've got to a degree doesn't guarantee you that you're going to become a millionaire. A degree just means that you have you've become disciplined in an area, and you've been qualified in that area, right? So let me put this another way. Just because you've gone to medical school, it doesn't make you a great doctor, a great plastic surgeon, a great GP. Do you understand what I mean? You actually have to provide value. You have to exchange your time. You have to exchange your services. You have to exchange a product of yours. You actually have to go out there and create value in the marketplace. You have to go out there and improve people's lives in some way. And what I would share with you is, the better you become at providing value to other people, the more money you'll be able to earn. And so actually, really the thing that you want to look at and you want to focus on the most is how valuable are you going to become? Because the more valuable that you become, the more knowledgeable, the more skillful you become, the quicker you're going to be able to become a millionaire, if that is your goal. But by the way, the other thing that I would ask you to consider is why you even want to become a millionaire. Because, a lot of people want to become a millionaire because it's something that sounds cool and it sounds really interesting and it sounds really hip and hop. But I would ask you why. Like, a lot of people, let me just say, for example, if you want £150,000, £150,000 is a lot of money, right? And also, you've got to think about what it's going to take, the sacrifices that you're going to have to make to be able to become a millionaire, right? There are sacrifices that you'll have to make to become a millionaire. And much more importantly, the reason why I'm asking you to ask yourself why you want to become a millionaire is because the reason why you're doing it should fuel much of the avenue that you're going to take, right? Now, that's a very kind of complicated concept for me to get into, but if you understand what I've just said, it will really, really, really help you out. But understanding why you're doing it should set as the foundation, right, for the route that you're going to follow. Because if your goal is just simply to become a millionaire, what does it matter what degree you take? It doesn't matter. Take the one that's going to get you there the quickest. But if you're doing it because you want to help other people, if you're doing it because you want to create stability for you, for your family, whatever, then you've got to start asking some questions with what are you prepared to do in terms of getting what you want, in terms of giving up family time instead of going out partying. Are you prepared to pursue a route that might get you there 10 years quicker, but you will probably be unhappy? Do you see what I mean? All of these questions are very complicated questions, and these are really the questions that you want to look at. But the basis of it is you've just got to become valuable. You've got to create value out in the marketplace. The more value you create in the marketplace, essentially, the quicker you will become a millionaire. So I hope that answers your question, which takes us to the fifth question, which says, how would you feel about your parents splitting up? And it goes something like this. My parents are splitting up, and I honestly don't know how I feel. I am not upset or anything. I've been told a few days ago about it, and I've thought nothing of it other than what house will we be getting and stuff like that. But that's basically it. I just don't know that there has been some family. I just know that there has been some family issues, but I've not really been involved. And my parents just told me that they're splitting up. Then we got McDonald's. Then we went and got McDonald's. They are both too old to have more children. They might have partners, but I probably just won't think anything of it unless it affects me. Well, great question. So let me firstly say I'm really sorry, obviously, that your parents are splitting up. It doesn't really matter what age you are. It doesn't really matter what the circumstances are that have led up to the split. I think it's always upsetting when any parents split up. I would be upset if my parents split up. So I'm really sorry that obviously they've decided to split up. The other thing that I would consider is, and I always talk a lot about this, is the context. I think when things tend to happen, and particularly when you're younger, you tend to think that everything revolves around you, that everything is your fault, or that everything that is happening around you is as a result of you. But as you get older and you mature, one of the things that you begin to realize is that everybody has their own agendas. Everybody has their own problems. Everybody has their own intentions. And so one of the things that becomes really important is to look at context, is to understand why people are doing what they're doing. Because a lot of the time, we judge people for what they've done, but we judge ourselves for the reason why we've done what we meant to do. And I think when you start looking at people and the decisions that people make, and you start asking yourself, I wonder what would have happened in order for these people to be like this. Let me put it like this. So I was explaining to a friend of mine recently who was explaining to me that they were really upset with their parents and they didn't really understand their mum. And I was explaining to him that, look, if you don't understand your mum, then that means there is basically there's a piece of the puzzle that you're missing. I was explaining to him like this: when the way in which people work is like this. When we meet people, people start telling us things about them, and as they start telling us things about them, we essentially start, if you can imagine their life being like a massive puzzle, we start putting the puzzle together. So if, for example, somebody says something like, oh, I'm really into art, and then they say to you, that's one piece of the puzzle, that the fact that they've said that they're into art. And then if they later on say to you, oh, and I'm working in an art gallery, you now, oh, they said that they like art, they work in an art gallery. Now you start putting the pieces together. If you start meeting people and they start telling you things about them and you start learning their behaviors and the way they act and they share their story and their truth, but the puzzle doesn't make sense, it is because usually you're not seeing the context. You're not seeing the reasons. There is something below it that you're missing. Okay, and when you are missing the foundation, when you're missing the glue, when there is essentially what you're missing is like the picture. So you know when you get like those puzzles, you know those puzzles that you put together. So you get a picture of like a train or a railway line, and you're gonna put it together. When you can't understand the picture and put it together, is because part of the reason is that you haven't got the big picture. You haven't got context. And so what I would share with you is, you want to just talk to your parents, actually. That's what I would do. I would ask, Mum, can I ask why did you decide to obviously get divorced? What's your reasons? I'll ask your dad. Dad, why did you decide to get divorced? They might tell you the truth, they might not tell you the truth. Because when someone's hurting, a lot of the time, the way that they defend themselves is to cut off all emotions. They don't want to talk about it. But that's what I would do, because a lot of the thing, when you're younger, I think there is a tendency, and in fact it is a defense mechanism, when you are experiencing a lot of confusion and a lot of pain and a lot of trauma, your mind actually shuts it out. It's called disassociation. Your body, and this is basically what happens when someone's been raped. A lot of people who've been raped can't remember what happens, because they're numb to it. They actually disconnected their emotion or their soul, their being disconnected to the actual physical act. And when you're a child and you go through a lot of trauma and a lot of pain, your body literally disassociates because it's too much. Your body and your mind and your psychology, it just cannot handle it. It's too much. So one of the ways in which we do that is, of course, we start talking. And as you start talking, you start to understand and see things from a different perspective, which gives you context. And then that creates loads of neural pathways. Stuff that's way too complex for me to get into. But the point being is, I would ask your parents, right? A lot of people have their own reasons for why they do what they do. And if you don't ask somebody the reasons why they've done what they've done, you have no choice but to make up your own reasons as to why they've done what they've done. That's what I would share with you. You've got to ask your parents. If you don't ask them, you have no choice but to make it up for yourself as to why they've done what they've done. So I hope that that's useful for you. But I'm really sorry about your parents. And actually, before I finish it off, let me finally finish it off with this. Do you know what I would do? I would start journaling if I were you. I would go and get a journal and start writing down what I'm experiencing, what I'm going through, what I'm seeing. Because I think that part of the reason that you don't feel any way about it is because you've not really connected with your emotions yet, right? You've not integrated what is going on with who you are and how you feel and what you're experiencing and what it means to you. The two haven't actually aligned. And I think if you will just buy a journal or notebook and just start writing down whatever you want. It can be, I like my mum, I hate my mum, my parents are going through divorce, today we went to McDonald's, whatever it is, just write it down. And in the months and years to come, you will get the purpose. You will get an insight or understanding as to why you needed to write down these feelings. At the moment, they won't make any sense, but later on, you will. You will get a revelation. You will get an insight, a lesson learned that you won't be able to, because you won't remember what you were feeling today or what you're going through today. Just something for you to think about. But thank you very much for the message. Okay, so that takes us on to the final one this week, which is, why are parents so against sex? And it reads like this. It really, really winds me up. Sex is normal. I totally get that people don't want their kids, especially under 16, to have sex. I totally get that they don't want to encourage it. However, it's okay. It's okay feeling this way, but they never think of things in the real world. Most teenagers have sex. They take extra risks when not able to open up about sex to those around them. They are scared to go to the doctors, scared to buy condoms. It's fucking wrong. I had my baby at 16, and what the fuck? I love her to pieces, but I do wish I waited, of course. Just had her at a little older age. I'm not saying it's all families' fault, but when they found condoms in my room, they screamed at me. I felt like I couldn't go doctors or anything in case I seen them there. How is this right? I know that when my daughter is older, I will talk to her openly about sex, and I will support her. So many people getting abortions, getting pregnant young, I know is partly down to them too. But come on, at such a young age, you need that support sometimes. Well, thank you very much for the question. And I will start off by, number one, congratulating you about your little baby. What a wonderful treasure. What a wonderful gift to have children, right? Yes, you had your baby a little bit younger than you should have, but I think what a wonderful gift anyway. You know, anyone who has children, anyone who has the opportunity to bring a child into life is truly one of the highest gifts of what it means to be a human being. So congratulations on that. In answer to your question, there are two things that are happening here. So the first of which is the problem that you're saying isn't actually the problem, right? The actual problem that you are saying is that you don't feel supported by your family. That's what I believe the problem actually is. Now, the problem is manifesting itself in terms of condoms and teenagers and whatever. But I actually think that the problem that you're really talking about here is the fact that your parents haven't really supported you and they haven't been there for you, right? And this is one of the things that actually having children does. When a lot of people have children, what tends to happen is that their children mirror and trigger what they never had. And so what a lot of parents tend to do is that a lot of parents tend to get into a trap where they want to give their children what they never had. And this is one of the biggest traps, and I want to pre-warn you about this, because one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people are unhappy with their parents, and you won't know about this, but in fact you would, because you're upset with your parents, right? One of the main reasons why a lot of people are upset with their parents, and when they're older, don't even talk to some of them don't even talk to their parents, is because their parents were never attuned to their needs, right? Their parents were telling them how their parents kept manipulating them and sending them down a route which they didn't want to go down, right? The parents assumed if they didn't go to university, then their child would want to go to university, right? The parents assume if they had a child at a young age, then their child should not want to have a child at a young age. Do you see what I mean? So the parent doesn't end up being attuned to their child. They ultimately end up trying to live out what they missed or what they didn't have through their children. And I want to pre-warn you about this, because I think you're about to repeat exactly the same cycle as your parents actually acted on to you. And I know that may be upsetting, but I just want you to think about that for a minute. The other thing that I would think about, and is really now, obviously, I don't really need to get into this question of why parents are against sex. You pretty much know all the basic reasons. Number one, it's a taboo. Number two, men do not regard women as highly. Men have a thing about women who are pure, okay, and innocent, and men like to be heroes, right? And men don't like damaged goods, and they don't like women who are not seen as pure. This is part of the reason why throughout history, women were not allowed to have sex. And in fact, most women lived in their parents' houses until the day of their marriage to stop them from having sex. Because once your daughter had sex before she was married, she was seen as like seconds, right? The way men see sex is very different to the way women see sex, okay? And this is, of course, in modern society, this is part of the reason why a lot of women are like, well, why can men sleep with multiple women and it's okay for them to do it, and whilst when a woman does it, they're seen bad. Unless you want to try and persuade most of the world against this, I wouldn't even bother going down this route, right? One of the things that I say to people is, every single one of us has obstacles and battles in life. You've got to choose which ones you want to fight, right? Some people are going to spend their whole life complaining and moaning about how it's unfair that men can have multiple women and it's okay, whereas women, if they sleep with multiple men, then it's not okay. And they spend their lives focusing on that and arguing that when that's not even their destiny. Their destiny is something completely different. So you want to decide for yourself which battle you want to go down. Right. So this question of why sex is bad, it's just, I could go on and on and on. But one of the main reasons is you have to understand that it's really about resources. Okay. This is part of the main reason why a lot of parents don't want their children to have sex. They can't take care of their child. They don't have resources. To the degree where, if you think about this, think for a minute and understand that you can't even get a house unless you're over the age of 18. So if you have sex at 16 and you have a baby, you can't even be on a rental, right? You can't even get a mortgage. They won't, even if your parents gave you the money to go and rent somewhere, you can't even get a mortgage. Next, you can't even go out and get a full-time job, right? Time, which means actually your parents have to look after your child. So I could go on and on and on and on and on about this, but I actually don't think that is a real problem, right? I think the problem is you need to repair the relationship that you have with your parents. This really is the main issue here. And I would say to you that if you don't resolve the issue with your parents, or whatever conflict that you have with your parents, you are about to repeat the same pattern with your baby. Because there is a saying that says that apple doesn't fall far from the tree. It really doesn't, right? And I say to people all the time that the cycle will continue repeating itself until somebody breaks it, right? And I would share with you that if you have a really bad relationship with your parents, do not be shocked that your baby has a bad relationship with you, right? I pre-warn you about this. Just something for you to think about. Obviously, your question is a very deep question. There are so many different layers. And the question that you've asked is I mean, this is like an hour-long question to look at the reasons why sex is bad. But I would say to you that actually the main thing that you need to be looking at is repairing the relationship between you and your parents. That's really, I believe, is the problem that you're actually asking here. But it's been covered up by all these other stuff to do with support and to do with having children young and condoms and being scared to go to the hospital. That's the problem, okay? You have an issue that your parents don't trust you, that your parents don't support you. So you need to repair that relationship. And if you repair that relationship, all of these other things actually become obsolete. They become irrelevant. Just something for you to think about. So that kind of leaves us with this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've tried my best to try and answer these questions, and I hope that they've been useful for you. If you guys have any questions that you want to share with us or you want us to answer, send them on our way. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Cassimotive to get more of this kind of stuff. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I will speak to you soon. Bye for now.